Hi, everybody. If someone could give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me. All right, I think we're back in business. So thank you so much for your patience while we were handling those technical difficulties. Very excited about our session this afternoon, moving your team forward through change. My name is Elizabeth Ballinger, and I will be moderating for us this session. A couple of housekeeping items before we jump in. The audio for the webinar is coming through your computer speakers. So if you're having trouble with that, make sure you can adjust. Refresh your browser for any audio or technical issues, just like Mike and I were experiencing. There will be recordings afterwards available, I think tomorrow. And then you can go ahead and download the slides on the Docs tab on the right side of your screen. So I will be monitoring the Q&A today, so please use that to submit your questions. Chat is for group conversations, and messages can be used to DM participants. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our speaker, Mike Reardon, PhD. He is the manager for the Blackbaud Advisory Plus services and the lead of the change management practice here at Blackbaud. He has over 25 years of experience teaching, learning, and consulting on organizational optimization projects, and he has a passion for helping customers navigate through the learning curve of transformation. Mike has been at Blackbaud for over 13 years, and before that, he was a professor and focused on the intersection of technology and successful communication. He lives in Charleston, South Carolina, with his wife and 4 children. Mike, thank you so much for leading our session today.
My pleasure, Elizabeth. And just to make sure, can someone give me a thumbs up if they hear me, just to be sure, since we had some challenges. Okay, thank you. And you guys you're seeing the slide deck with my picture on it now? I'm a little gun shy here, but thank you for introducing and moderating today. And as Elizabeth said, hopefully we'll have a robust chat. There's gonna be a couple times today because we don't, thank you, Nicole, that we don't have a ton of people in here, which is fine. Sometimes you have these conferences and you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and it's hard to do anything with chat. It looks like a manageable number. We tried to cap these skills labs at that number. So I'm gonna have a couple times where I do ask for some participation via chat. But as Elizabeth said, please use the Q&A tab for questions. She's going to keep an eye on that. I'll try to keep an eye on that as well and leave some time at the end for questions, even though we're getting a little bit of a late start. But yeah, I've been at Blackbaud over 13 years. I live in Charleston. They're my bullets. And in terms of what I do and what I like to do, I love to play golf. I don't play enough, but we have 4 kids and 2 dogs. One's a puppy, and so it's keeping us busy. I don't know about you guys, how much you've seen. I've really enjoyed the conference to this point, thinking about all the change that's been part of, the technology revolution and all the different things that people are introducing us to and talking about. I really enjoyed Wendy's keynote on innovation and entrepreneurship. I thought there were so many good nuggets in there, just in terms about the culture of change. And there was one earlier today with Shelby Talent. I'm not sure if anyone got to see Shelby there cultivating a culture of smart innovation. So she talked a lot about the progression to AI. And, if you go through the agenda here, you look at things like Power Automate and CRM Page Designer and Sky API and machine learning and, of course, AI and culture. It's so many cool things, right? My job and my sort of background is not in a lot of those things. I'm not a tech folks. So when Eric and the team from BB Dev Days when they start talking about no code and low code, that's when my ears perk up, because that's why today's world is so cool, right? Because even if you're not, a MIT trained developer, you could develop a lot of cool things. My world, though, is about change, and what all these kind of sessions are talking about are usually introducing some kind of change. At Blackbaud, when I do a lot of work day to day, I help our customers when they're implementing some of the Blackbaud products like Razor's Edge or Blackbaud CRM. That's a big change. Sometimes, though, there's smaller change. It's introducing Power Automate to maybe some processes, but you still have to get people on board, right? And so when I thought about this conference and presenting at BB Dev Days, like I said a couple years ago, I'd be like, no, that's not my world. But the more I think about it, and the more I think about where we're going in today's world, it is my world, in not my world, but there is an opportunity to have these conversations that I think are valuable, because you're always trying to deal with moving people along and moving your teams along. For a lot of people who attend these conferences, and you're leader enough to be attending and presenting and interacting, you're probably leading in your own organization. And that's really what I want to talk about today, right? And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about change management. My guess is some folks are aware of it, but I'll just do a quick little primer on sort of what it is, and some big ideas there. I want to talk just for a minute about the difference between change and transition, because I think it's an important one to think about, especially as leaders and colleagues to teams. And then I really want to get in the meat. The meat is going to be 5 tips. And actually, spoiler, there's actually 6 tips, because I have 2B. I have 1, then I have 2, then I have 2B. So I don't know why I didn't just have 6 tips, but anyway, so that's what we're going to do. And so hopefully these tips are things that you could take away, jot down. Of course, the deck is available in the Docs tab, but hopefully a nugget or two. I know you guys are probably still trying to do your job and you're watching sessions, so no one's going to memorize a half an hour or 40-minute discussion, but hopefully a couple of these nuggets stay with you and are helpful as you move forward. Does that sound good? Everyone happy and looking forward to it? This sounds like looks like a good crew. Looking forward to doing it. Just a couple of sort of, as they say, startling statistics as a sort of an attention getter, right? McKinsey did some work last year talking about the state of organizations, right? And of course, it's changing every month. But a couple of stats in that report really jumped out to me. Number one is only 25% of employees who they surveyed said their leaders are engaged and passionate when they're talking about tech transformation. And I found that number astonishing. Like I said, I get to work with Blackbaud customers pretty much every day in doing my change management, but also, I manage this team of advisory plus consultants, which is a really fantastic team. I'm happy to talk about that anytime. But I'm always really honored to be part of these projects, because I know no matter what the size of your organization is, whether it's 5 people or 5,000 people, and I've dealt with organizations on both ends of the spectrum, usually an investment in tech is a significant investment, right? Relative to your budget, whether you're small, medium, or large. And so to me, I always encourage people, you should be excited. You should be passionate and hopefully inspiring people, because it's nice in today's world where organizations are investing. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I think that matters. And we'll talk about a little bit that later. The second thing is only 5% of the respondents felt like their organizations had what they needed in terms of technology capability. I mean, 5%, those are big, big numbers. They're maybe the opposite, small numbers, right? So you've got sort of a situation here, right? But the leaders who do foster understanding and conviction, when they put them up against each other, of those who didn't in that same survey, outperform their peers by more than 3x in terms of what they're trying to do. And so, like I said, as leaders in your organization, demonstrating that you get the situation, the organization situation, especially when it comes to tech, conviction and passion for it. And then at the bottom one, I'll say this, that organizations that provide the tools to support staff and behavior changes, right? As part of the transformation, not just saying, hey, we should be more data driven. We should be more focused on mining what we know and what we don't know and all those kind of things. The organizations that actually provide the tools are almost 4 times as likely for success, right? And then on top of it all, Blackbaud research came out last year, middle bullet there. Early adopters of new technology have exceeded their fundraising goals by over 1/3 more than their peers, right? So not only investing in that technology, having a passion for it. In other words, it's just worth it. And it's worth it to take care of not just the invest in signing the check kind of thing, but thinking thoughtfully about, will people adopt this? Will they use it? What reservations do they have? And at the end of the day, that's what change management is, right? It's this idea of trying to take the long view and understanding, what do people know about this project? What don't they know? What do they want to know? What are they scared about? What are they nervous about? What are they excited about? We're living in a world of a lot of transition, obviously, right? And even just talking about the topics that are being discussed at this great conference. I mean, everyone seems to be talking about, well, how will AI actually be used? How will we use it in my team or for my colleagues? And will it replace my job? And what could it do? All those kind of things. At the end of the day, I have a slide later, but I'll say it now. Any kind of uncertainty can bring about some anxiety. And when people have anxiety or are anxious about something, they're not as engaged and they're not as likely to adopt, right? So if you want the sort of short equation for why change management matters, is because at the end of the day, if you want to invest in tech, right, and you want to keep progressing and be modern and be forward looking and take advantage of all the amazing things that we could offer to folks now in today's world, then you also got to think about, will they use it? Will they adopt it? Right? And if they do so, how will that look? Right? And so that's why that idea of focusing on the human element, to me, is even more important in 2025 than it was back before I had gray hair, was when I started this whole thing, right? Back in the day. And so if you've ever studied change management, you've probably seen some kind of change curve. It just demonstrates that there's a learning curve to anything. Think about something simple, whether you think about like when you move homes. We've been in this house now for a while, but I remember when we moved to this house, I took a business trip. I came back late on a weeknight. I don't know what night it was, Thursday night. And I realized I got in my car. It was the first trip I'd taken since we moved. And I realized I didn't know how to get to my new house. I had to Google map it to my own house. I certainly didn't have to do that the previous month, right? I mean, there was a learning curve. I mean, it's a simple one. But when you start thinking about new technology, even when people are yearning for new tech, this is so old, this is a dinosaur, it's clunky, it takes 20 steps, it should be 3 steps. And then you finally invest in it, and then they're like a little bit slow. You're like, what's going on? There's just a learning curve there, right? And sometimes the 20 steps are easier than the 3 that you have to look, at your notes, right? And you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I have to click this first. And the goal of any change management is to try to shallow out that curve. We won't eliminate that feeling of newness and the learning curve that goes along with it. But if you do some planning and you think about, what are the questions they're going to have? What is the pushback? Who is going to push back? All those kind of elements are important, and they're normal and natural, right? It doesn't mean they're bad employees. It doesn't mean that they're, won't come on board. It doesn't mean that anyone did anything fundamentally wrong. It is human nature to resist change. We are more likely, baked into our DNA, to go with what we know. And that goes back to caveman and cavewoman days, right? I'm going to take the safer route, which is what I know, because I know there's no lions on that route. That way, I don't know, right? It's risk aversion. And it's always, less risky to do what you know. So it comes naturally, right? And so it's something just to expect and plan for. The last thing I would just mention real quick is this idea of transition. This comes from a gentleman named William Bridges. And if you could think of a better name for someone who wrote a transition model, let me know. His name is William Bridges. But he talked about this transition model, and I really like it, right? Because it's about change, right? And like I said, if you've ever read anything or studied anything about change management, there's a ton of different models out there and certifications and graphs and all this kind of stuff. I'm happy. I've written some. You go to the Blackbaud Institute. We have a change management toolkit. You're free to download that I wrote, and you're welcome to have it. There's a lot of resources out there, but I like how Bridges talks about this, because it's not about a discrete point A to point B. It's this idea of transition, right? And he talks about one thing ending and moving to something new. And in the middle, there's that neutral zone that he talks about. And the reason I like it is because as leaders, as managers, as colleagues, it's a good way to talk about change with our colleagues in our teams. Because what Bridges reminds us is that change is the sort of the thing, right? It's the new software, it's the new process, it's the new boss, it's the new org chart. The transition is what the process that people have to go through to come over to that new beginning. And that's what I like about it. It does sort of, I think, very succinctly just sort of describe what happens. And that's important to know as a leader. And the reason I like it is because when you're talking to your team, it gives you a good vocabulary for how to talk about it. Let's say you institute a new database, right? This idea of, moving to Blackbaud Razor's Edge or upgrading to Blackbaud NXT, right? The web view. That's been a lot of change for a lot of folks. It's a good question to ask, like, so where are we? Joe or Sue or Bob or whoever. Say, are we still sort of in the old place? Are we in that transition, that neutral zone? Are we moving to new beginnings, right? And it gives people a way to talk about sort of where they are. And that's really important because sometimes to me, it's hard to articulate, right? I mean, in this way, you can articulate it without being sort of grumpy or pushing back, right? So that's why I like this model. And there's a ton more written about it in that, his book there, Managing Transitions, that I cite, but just gives you a different vocabulary, right? I mean, I think we all get the sort of idea of a learning curve, but I like this idea of, like just sort of shifting through that slide, right? And I'll just go back there. This idea we're sort of sliding from one, putting a punctuation mark, a period there, over to new beginnings. Okay? So that's my, few minute sort of primer on change and transition. And now I want to dive into offering some tips. Like I said, hopefully some of these will be things that will resonate. Whether, again, you're investing in a whole new CRM or a whole new kind of organizational-wide software, or if you're just changing or tweaking a process, maybe, like I said, introducing some Power BI or Power Automate or all those kind of cool things that I don't really know how to do personally, but I love seeing them. And so any of these things can apply, okay? So that's what we'll do, talk about these tips. And remember, you have that bonus one coming up. Tip one, if people would stop me in an elevator and say, hey, Mike Reardon, you talk about change management. What's one tip you could give me? Now, I always say that. Not one person in my life has ever stopped me in an elevator and asked me that, or on the street. But if they did, I would say, just make sure you explain the why, right? What is your vision for what's going on? Because if we agree that people have to go through that neutral zone or go through the learning curve or whatever way makes sense for you, to see how your teammates or your colleagues experience change, then it's fair as a professional adult. I always say it's very fair. We're professional adults to say, tell me why we're doing this again, because yesterday I knew how to do my job and today I don't. And that's frustrating to me. And so if you, as the leader of a change or as part of the team who's introducing this change, if it hasn't been thought through all the way, like, how would you answer that question? Tell me why we're doing this, right? People will respond when they know there's a logic behind things, even if they don't agree, right? There's a lot of work in psychology. It talks about how do people accept or absorb, air quote, bad news. And I'm not saying all change is bad, but they get exceptionally frustrated when that bad news doesn't seem to have a logic behind it, right? That it feels like, oh, this is just every year we go through this, right? We've all worked in organizations where there's a sort of, people, talking around the water cooler and say, oh yeah, here we go again, new org chart, and once a year they do it just because they want to shake things up. When people start talking like that, where it feels like there's no real logic behind it, that's not inspiring, right? Go back to that first slide. And so making sure that you or whoever is on the team is able to articulate the why, right? Have that water cooler speech or that elevator speech ready. So I'll tell you exactly why, right? And the biggest tip I'll give on that front is making sure that the first thing you do is define the problem. I'm sort of nice there in that slide. I say the element, but I'm saying what is the problem you're addressing? What is the speed bump? What is the obstacle? What is the challenge that you think needs addressing? Whether we're not as efficient, we're losing ground to other people in our business or other people in the community. We don't have the finances to hire more staff, so we have to figure out how to get more nimble and quicker, right? We're behind on our campaign goals. We're not engaging with the community. What's the problem you're addressing, right? Because here's the thing. If you come to me and you provide or offer me a solution, but I don't think that there's a problem, then I'm not listening to your solution, right? I manage a team at Blackbaud. I have salespeople who call me and they'll say, "Oh, Mike, we've got a new offer here. It's going to streamline the way that your team talks to customers or something," right? And I'll say, "Okay, that sounds like a wonderful solution, but that's not a problem that my team has," right? It's like going to the car dealership and you say, "Hey, I really want a car with great gas mileage. I commute 60 miles a day each way." And they say, "Well, okay, I hear you, but here is this SUV that we just slashed $5,000 off of." And it's like, we're not speaking the same, we're not speaking the same language, right? So if someone presents to you a solution, right, and then let's turn it back into the tech and let's turn it back into the software. If someone's converting to Razor's Edge NXT, but I think the current solution is just fine and is serving our needs, am I going to be on board to moving? No, of course not, right? So you have to, as a leader, as a what's the word I want? Sort of an instigator, if you will, of change. You have to figure out what is that problem that we're solving for, and how do I connect the dots for what my team does, right? Because if I don't see how it's connected, if I don't agree it's a problem, then I'm not on board with whatever solution that you're offering, right? It is a really important thing. So when you're thinking about the vision, you're thinking about telling people, I'm excited to introduce this new idea, right? Whether, again, it's a small tweak, a big overhaul, whatever you're talking about, your change, start with the problem. If you're literally writing out your remarks, maybe you're doing a webcast to your team, or maybe you have a meeting with people if you work face-to-face, or whatever the situation is, and you're jotting down some things to think about, start with the problem. Tell a story about how this problem is jamming this team up. Tell a story about how this problem, paint a vision of how this problem is slowing the team down. And that idea of it being slowed down is not allowing the team to reach their goals. Now I'm listening, right? And once I'm listening, then I'm more likely to hear. You have to say, therefore, now that we see there's a problem, let me tell you what I think we should do about the solution. Or let me tell you what we've done to address this, right? There you go. That's in terms of painting that vision. That is what you do. Okay. That's tip 1. How's everyone doing? You ready to chat a little bit? Everyone's fingers warmed up? The second thing is understanding your audience, right? And people who have heard this before, maybe. It's time. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Eric. We've got the head. We got the big fella here. Eric is one of the main people behind this BB Dev Days, and it's wonderful. Let me ask you a question. You've probably heard this idea of audience analysis, but let's pretend for a second that we have come up with a new curriculum for elementary and middle schools, right? And I want to go talk to some schools and try to sort of pitch it to them, right? And you are going to have some conversations, and you have to think about how to talk to people about it, maybe what examples to use. Who are some different audiences that you might think about that you have to address if you're talking to people associated with a school? And throw them into the chat real quick if you have a second. Who are some different audiences that would be interested in a new curriculum that's going to, impact them in some way that you're going to need to talk to? Teachers, for sure, right? Parents, school board, that's right, teachers. Who else might be affected by a curriculum? Students. Yeah. Thanks, Nicole. You read my mind, right? And so if I'm going to talk to these different groups, these different constituencies, this is where I love working in the nonprofit and social good sector, because people in this sector are usually really good at doing this naturally. They understand there's a different conversation to be had with, let's say, a young alum versus a donor who might be, a generational donor down the line, right? Those are different kinds of conversations. And so if you were having these conversations, you'd probably use different examples for the teachers than you would the students. I used to be a teacher, as Elizabeth said. I was a professor, so I wasn't grade school, but it was the same kind of thing. When I would hear someone talk about a new curriculum, what's the first thing I think about? Oh, well, I'm going to have to rewrite my lesson plans. I'm going to have to rewrite my syllabus. I'm going to have to get new books, right? I'm going to have to figure out a new way to approach this class. When kids hear about it, the students hear about it in a grade school setting, if they heard about a new curriculum and say, well, does this jam up our recess? Right? That's what's important to them. And so when you're thinking about having these conversations, always then put yourself in their shoes and say, what do they value? Right? What do they care about most? And so in my previous example, I'd probably want to talk to the teachers about how my curriculum actually saves them time in the summer, and there's no need to rewrite lesson plans because it's part of the curriculum or whatever. I'm spitballing. But, and for the parents, you'd want to talk about how it better prepares them for high school and the college and beyond, right? Or whatever the case is. For students, you'd want to talk about how it's a more engaging curriculum and you have fun while you're in class and all those kind of things. And a lot of us do this pretty naturally, but it's really important when you're trying to introduce this change is think about who are the different pockets of people I need to talk to and communicate with, right? And that's really important to do. Do they have a sort of sentiment about this project? Do they know about it? First of all, do they care about it? Do they think it's relevant to them? These are all the kind of things that you should do as you're thinking about mapping out some communication, right? And here's that little bonus tip is after you do the audience analysis, and let's say you think about just carrying the same example, parents, teachers, students, school board, right? And then you have to identify those different, challenges / opportunities. Again, I'm saying it in a nice way. What are the things that they're nervous about? And this is that little shortcut equation I mentioned earlier. If there is uncertainty, what questions do they have? That leads to anxiety. And people who are anxious are not as open to adopt. They're not as open to new things. And so the more that you could put yourself in the shoes of all those different audiences and think about what they know, don't know, what they're nervous about, that's what's important. And answer those questions that you think they might have. And it is going to be different, right? So different teams, different people probably are going to want different or call for different approaches. I did a lot of work in training at Blackbaud and then change management, obviously, right? The major gift officers, the fundraising team, it cares about different things than the back office operational team, right? When you start talking about a new Blackbaud CRM, the processing team was like, show me how to do different batches when I'm processing gifts. And the major gift officers were like, can I use it on my phone? Can I pull up a quick bio? Can I enter contact reports real quick? Because I need to go. Different, there's focus and different interested on different things, right? And so whenever you're thinking about those different audiences, that's what you have to think about is who are they? What do they care about? How am I going to talk to them about it? The third tip I want to get to is this idea of repetition. You've probably heard something like this before, but let me ask you a question. In terms of communication, and communication is a backbone of good change management. How many times do you think that you need to repeat a message before 50% of your audience actually sort of air quote hears it? How many times do you think you need to repeat a message before 50% hears it? Topher says 7. Have you guys ever heard the sort of phrase 7 times 7 ways? No less than 7. Elizabeth is in for 3. You guys are all, right around the ballpark there. This goes to some research done by Edelman, in the advertising agency, right? And what they find is that if people only hear a message once, only 4% of that audience is actually going to digest it. Air quote, hear it. These numbers on this graph are cumulative, right? So when you do it 2 times, it's 18%. Then you get to that third time that Elizabeth said, right? Eric, be careful, you're getting in trouble. You get to 53%, right? So you need to say things 3 times, and that's just for your team, half your team to hear it, right? Then you get into the 4 and into the 7. A lot of times people hear, 7 times 7 ways, or we need to hear things. Look, we all agree that we are bombarded by stimuli all the time, right? And it's just a good reminder. If you are the communicator, if you are the leader, and you're the person who is, in charge of letting people know about upcoming events and all these changes, it will become redundant to you, and you will feel like you have said it a million times. But just know that repetition is how humans learn. And hearing it once while I have Teams up and I have a webinar up and I'm looking at my email and I'm trying to finish something else, I don't hear it, right? And I'm only going to hear it when I think it's relevant, and that's only going to happen when there's repetition, right? Which is why the previous tip is really important, because if you connect it to something I care about, now I'm more likely to listen. Okay? That's a quick tip. Tip 4. Some people are counting, might be tip 5. Start, stop, and continue. You may have heard this one before as well, but I like it, and it's one of those things that if you understand that all change is incremental, right? But it's really important as a leader of change, you have to define those increments. What do you actually want me to start doing differently, right? I process gifts, so what do you want me to do? Tell me specifically. What do I need to stop doing? And then perhaps most important, what do you want me to continue doing? And I say it's most important because sometimes when you feel like the world beneath you is shifting all the time, sometimes it's really important to hear what's not shifting. And so as you're going through transition, whether again it's a full tech overhaul or maybe smaller things, remind people what's not changing, that we're still trying to achieve our mission, that we're still trying to contribute to building relationships that help us cure cancer, educate people, help homeless folks, teach people to read, all the amazing things that you and your organizations do. That doesn't change whether I'm using an iPhone or an Android or a piece of paper and a pen. That is not changing. But you have to be specific with folks, like, what do you want me to do? Right? And when you get down to the sort of brass tacks of it all, this isn't my phrase, but I love it. I can't remember where I first read it, but they said, listen to this. Isn't this great? They said, some is not a number and soon is not a time. And so if you want me to start using, let's say, new software Don't just say, hey, we need to get in and do some of this stuff soon. We need to start using that new functionality soon. Say, what I'd like you to do is do 3 queries in the new software by Friday, and then let's look at them. Specific, right? You guys have probably heard of SMART goals. It's very much aligned in the same thing. But as a change leader, don't assume people know what you want them to start and stop, right? And sometimes it's just as simple as laying it out there and say, I need you to stop using the spreadsheets that everyone has on their own laptop and start using the new CRM. Okay? And then this last tip is getting folks involved and really modeling the behavior you want to see. This comes out of some research that I've done in my work as change management. So we do a lot of survey work as we're working with larger organizations, and we ask people about, how prepared were you for this, and was the project a success? And what we also do is we look at whether people actually participated in the project, right? And as you see here, people who participated in the project, and it was a simple yes, no. Did you have any participation role versus you didn't, right? So as they were going through the transition, the migration, whatever. Look at these numbers. We asked people then, would you assess the project as successful? People who participated had a 29% higher score than people who didn't. People who participated in the project felt like they had more support from their manager, right? They were more committed to the project success. That one is almost obvious, right? I will support what I help build. And they also, of course, felt better prepared. So the takeaway is get folks involved, do focus groups, do a tiger team, get some folks involved in any way you can. And then the second thing is model the behavior you'd want to see from other people. You want people to go to training, then go. You want people to start using it, then use it, right? You want people to start talking about it in terms of, using new vocabulary, then use it yourself. But you can't, how you react to things, how you model that behavior, that new tech, new sort of fixes, it's not going to save the world. And so if you come across a hiccup, you're like, okay, yeah, but this is still better than what we used to do, right? And sort of rolling with those punches is really important for your teams to see, and it matters. It's contagious. Positivity is contagious. Not as much as negativity, but negativity is even more contagious, the research will show. But being that positive, forward-looking leader is really important to folks. I'm going to tell you real quick, we're coming up on time, and I have just a little wrap-up slide, but if anyone has questions, ping me. It just, I know, like I said, we started a couple minutes late. I apologize for that little snafu. I really believe change management is important, and perhaps even gaining more importance, because at the end of the day, all this talk about AI and power this and power that, there's still that human element that's involved. Even if we're taking the human element out of certain things, there's still reactions to it. There's still emotions tied with it, and there's still adoption of it. And so hopefully there's a couple things here and there that you got a couple tips that will help you as you navigate these changes, and help you and your team and your organizations continue to progress and grow and continue to do all those great things that you're doing already. So I know we're a little bit short on time. This deck will be shared. My name is Michael Reardon. I go by Mike, but Michael's fine too. It's michael.reardon@blackbaud.com. I'm always open to a quick question. If you wanted to have a chat, let me know, but I'm happy to answer anything that came up now or later. So like I said, I know we're at time and people probably have other sessions to go to, but
we don't have any questions in the Q&A, but this was excellent. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I feel like I've learned some things that I want to take back to my team, and I can't say enough good things about this one. So glad that we were able to do it.
Yeah. Thanks for your help, Elizabeth. Thanks to all who came, and enjoy the rest of the conference, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, all.
Bye.